back to the Spicy Dog Podcast, everybody.
Welcome back.
It's getting spicy.
Yep. The Spicy Dog Podcast.
The Spicy Dog Podcast is here. Why is it spicy?
Today we're going to talk about simplifying your training.
Yeah.
Simplifying it.
3 simple commands, you know? That's what we train here at Miracle Canine.
It's true.
Why?
Why do we do it?
Mm-hmm.
Because your dog doesn't need to know that many things.
No.
I would much rather your dog know a few things really, really well than them know 25 commands and they maybe do it like 20% of the time. That's not impressive. It's only impressive if you're in your living room and you're showing off to your friends. And you're
too much to focus on
in front of you.
sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not very practical.
Yeah.
Not very
Well, I think
practical at all.
I think it goes more across the board between ages as well as reasons for training. Like if it's a puppy, just puppy stuff, it's like, okay, their mind's going a million times a second. It's going to be easier to kind of get them focused on just holding a bed stay or doing a down stay or doing a recall or something, as opposed to doing all these extra little things that people like to add in, as well as older dogs that have resource guarding or fear aggression or something where it's just like, it's easier to tone it down a little bit by just having them have a very clear, easy understanding of just go and lay on that bed, go into your crate or go into the down and just like chill, you know?
Yeah.
Like simplifying things, like for young puppies specifically, as we get puppies into the program or if you're raising a puppy, I think it's more beneficial to teach them fundamentals and basics than focus on actual commands right away. Like being able to go to a park and not be screaming or trying to pull near all dogs and people and just kind of chill out rather than making them stand to a sit and making them look at you every single 5 seconds. So like getting a young dog in or raising a new dog into your house, focus on like the fundamentals.
That's a huge thing that I find with walking is people get so caught up on, oh, well, like my dog's still like looking at those other dogs.
Yeah.
I'm like,
People
okay,
say that all the time.
are they still within, your bubble? Are they still?
And then they're doing like the look at me,
yes.
look at me,
and that
stuff like
it's
that.
the look at me. Yeah, that's what I was gonna get. It's like
leave it, look at me, leave it.
So extra. It's just like it's instinctual. It's okay for your dog to be aware of its surroundings. It is not okay for it to react to those surroundings. So make that clear line, have it clear and understanding for them, and it's one word. That's it.
Yeah.
Like the whole walk should be one word.
Yep.
2 words if you have to give a correction.
Sure.
But
yeah, people focus often on when you're doing the walk, like all these extra things, and you don't realize if you teach your come command and you make come mean just what that means, come with me and stay with me, you can enforce that the entire walk. You don't need to be like, heel, no, come here, no, come here. You can just focus, if you're not wishy-washy, that when we're on the focus walk, we don't go sniffing this pole and that pole and go pee on this bush and that bush. And we can keep them focused, so when we do have that sniff time, when we do have that free time, they can take the opportunity and really be a dog.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like, I've seen, I don't want this to come across rude, but it might. I feel like if somebody, there's like a lot of people I've observed that they teach their dog a command for like everything. Like they're like, oh, I need them to learn how to give me their paws so that if they ever get a thorn stuck, that they have a command so that I can do it. Or, oh, I need to teach them a stand command so that I can clean their feet off. Oh, I need to teach them a muzzle command so that if they need the muzzle on, they have that. I need to teach them how to X, Y, and Z, right? For all of these various situations. And to me, if you need to teach like a command to get compliance for all of these little things, to me that shows that you don't really have the skill to just organically create a relationship with your dog where they would just let you do those things.
right.
Like, I don't need a command to do my dog's nails. I don't need a command to put things on my dog. I don't need commands to brush them. I don't need commands to, like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels like, and there's so much emphasis on like creating a behavior and in like reinforcing it over creating a relationship with your dog where you can organically just get them to allow you to do things just because they trust you at that point.
Yeah.
Like there was a video, I don't remember if I sent it to you or not, but Ivan Balabanov made a video somewhat recently, within the last month or so, of him working with 2 or 3 of his dogs on, and his whole point was, he's like, all of these dogs have never had a muzzle on. He's like, I'm gonna put a muzzle on them and you're gonna see them not care.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, because if I do something to them, they just let me do it.
Mm-hmm.
His whole point was like, I don't need to do all this fancy stuff.
Yeah.
Because if they start messing with the muzzle, I tell them not to and they stop doing it.
Yeah.
They trust me enough that if I put this on, they just allow it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because his whole philosophy is training through play, relationship building, trust, like all of that kind of stuff. And then everything else just kind of like falls into place.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that there's not a lot of emphasis on that anymore. Because it's looked at, and I think his whole point of doing it was kind of like I don't need this like cooperative care bullshit.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to teach my dog like, oh, you have to consent to me putting a muzzle on you or doing all these things. It's like, no, if I need to do something to my dog, I'm going to do it. And if they protest, then I'm going to tell them not to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just kind of how it's going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And work them through those like things rather than coming up with this like command. And most of the time people are like, my dog knows like left and right and this, and their dog doesn't know.
Yeah.
Left and right. And they're like these perceived things that these dogs know, and you spend all this time with all these extra things and like, leave it, don't touch the muzzle.
Yeah.
And you could just be teaching like, you have to be cooperative for some things that I'm doing with you. Whether you consent and you love it, or it's part of your health that needs maintained.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I get that there's an appeal, like I get the appeal of the process, like I find it enjoyable to do like free shaping with my dogs, to see them be able to learn and create behaviors and stuff like that. But I don't do it because I'm actually practically gonna need it.
Yeah.
I do it because it's good for their brain.
Yeah.
And it's fun and it's a way for us to like bond together. But like, I don't question that like if I had to do anything to my dogs at any point, that they would fight me on any of it.
Yeah.
And if they did, I don't think it would be enough of a fight that I couldn't get it done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I don't have a dog where I'm like, oof, I could never do that to them.
Yeah. They
Or
would bite me.
They would bite me, or it'd be this huge thing. Like I just would not tolerate that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they know
Or
it.
you have to worry about them even biting you.
Yeah. And not to say that like I didn't have a dog who was 100% capable of doing that at one point, you know, and I had to kind of address that and work through it to get to this space with him. But I think that's part of it, is that I didn't skirt around the issue of like, oh, I need to teach him all of these things so that he'll let me do this stuff. It was like, our core issue right now is respect.
Mm-hmm.
That's the issue.
Yep.
And that's what we need to address at that point. And so, and all of this to say, I guess, and tie back to like our simplifying thing, is that like, I think people overcomplicate it.
They like flashy, like right now with social media, people like flashy dog training, and like within 30 seconds your dog can do this set of routines and things because they like they feel like their dog's listening to them. They're like, look how much my dog can do. Where I'm so much more impressed with dogs that have neutrality into their environment. They can go anywhere without freaking out. They can hold really simple commands when guests come over, when people come over in these high arousal situations. And that to me is so much more impressive than seeing your dog like jump and reverse and spin and do all these fancy things. Not that there's anything wrong with like teaching tricks and things, but get your core basics down before you really get into like all the trick training.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, because we get so many people, sorry Seamus, to interrupt you. We get so many people that bring in dogs that are terribly behaved, but they know like paw and roll over and like all these nonsense
Yeah.
tricks.
Yeah.
Which is like, if you were able to teach your dog these like semi-difficult tricks, like you very well could have probably focused a little bit of that on some obedience. But I suppose it's different because there's, typically when you're doing tricks, it's in your living room with a treat right in front of you and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You're
Simulation.
I don't know if you're guys, this is a side note, but if your friends and family like think that you teach tricks all day, because I'll like tell people about dog training and they're like, it's so cool that you can teach paw and you cuddle with puppies all day. I'm like, that's not what I do.
Majority of the dogs that we work with do not want to.
Like, well, how do you teach them to roll over?
Yeah.
Like, I know how to do all of that,
Yeah.
but that's literally nothing that I do all day.
Well, and so what I was going to say is like with the kind of going back, I forget which one of you said it, but with when you see a person walking their dog and they're saying leave it or look at me or whatever, I feel like it complicates things, but it also doesn't actually address the issue of why you have to keep repeating that command too. It's like if you feel the need that you have to have that focus locked in on you for whatever reason, like why not just use the command to eliminate that behavior, and then then they have that understanding.
Yeah.
It brings back that respect. It's like, but if the dog doesn't know they're making a mistake, obviously they're going to keep doing it unless you have that treat in your hand every single time. They're not going to care. Exactly. But once they know that it's a mistake and they're like, then that's on them to make that choice of whether they want to go after that dog or whatever, get hyped up, as opposed to not listening to you or not.
Yeah.
I have to care about like the consequence associated that you're delivering.
Right.
But I think that's the exact thing, is that people overcomplicate their training in an effort to avoid having to correct their dog.
Yes.
They're making up all of these things to try to like avoid the inevitable, and then when the inevitable happens, they're just like,
and that's why you find yourself saying like look or leave it 50 times every time you walk by a dog.
Yeah.
To me, that's like a little bit sad. Like I have dogs in my neighborhood.
It's stressful.
And I'm passing them, and they're like, Murphy, leave it. And you just get like panicked, and your dog can sense that.
Yeah.
And then the more you repeat and the more you speak to your dog, the less it means.
Yeah.
Make your voice count when you're asking your dog to do something.
Yeah.
And ask yourself, what am I asking of my dog right now? Am I asking them to sit and hold them accountable?
Yeah.
If you're asking them to come, hold them accountable.
Yeah.
Vice versa with like the things that we're trying to teach them. Like, we have
and it comes again to teaching and having them have an understanding. Don't expect an untrained dog to say come, and if they don't come, you just like punish them. You know what I mean? Like you got to put in the work and teach them first, but then once they have the understanding, that's when it comes on them. But if you have to say leave it 50 times every time you walk by a dog, how much respect do you think that dog has for you? If they're still
and if it
fully
works,
pulled out.
the only reason is because you're just so distracting.
Yeah.
Because you're like, leave it. You're like acting like a clown trying to like get your dog to look at you and pay attention, just in the effort that they're not going to look at your dog. I was out in my out on the road in front of my house the other day because my car had to get towed. So there's like this big car, like tow truck and people and all this stuff. And this woman was walking down my sidewalk with her little tiny dog. And as we're approaching, she like stops and she puts her dog in a sit like 50 feet away. And the dog's like, just pumped. He's just ready. He's like so ready. And she like starts walking with him again. And the whole time she's going, no bark, no bark, no bark. And he's going, like those like little like under his breath stuff. And he's like jumping in the air and getting closer. And she gets closer and closer. And of course, as soon as he gets like right next to us, he just loses it and explodes. And she just keeps yelling at him, no bark, no bark. And then she gets past us and she goes, good, no bark. And my husband looks at me and he goes, he barked.
He was barking the whole time.
He barked. And I was like, I don't know. And what was odd though was that she had a prong collar on him. And I so badly wanted to like,
just
go up to her and be like, just say no and go, and he's gonna stop. Yeah. And it's gonna be done and over with. Because, like, clearly she was probably trying, and that's the thing, like you said, it's sad because it's like they're trying.
Yeah.
You know? Any bad intentions by
no.
that they're generally trying to fix or mend their relationship with their dogs so they're the most exciting things.
Yeah.
But you realize you don't have to be a circus performer to get your dog to listen to you.
Yeah.
You have to be motivating and you have to have clarity in your training for your dog to listen to you.
Yeah.
And it's generally like, it is a little bit about respect too. Like the
Yeah.
dog has to know that you're going to provide those consequence. And if we find ourselves in a trap of being so permissive all the time, and then right when we want our dogs to perform the behavior, then we're really hard on them, that doesn't transfer well. And then
No, it
that's where we see stress come out, and that's why people are like, e-collar trainers are evil. It's just like, there's terrible e-collar training out there.
Yeah, well, like you think about, like you said, you can't be super permissive, and then one day their behaviors that you've let go for so long make you so mad that then you react out of anger and you correct them for something. That's just not fair.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the same way that, like, even with children, if they're, whoever is parenting them, if your behaviors to their behaviors constantly vary and change and are unpredictable. You know, sometimes they knock their juice over and you're like, oh, it's an accident, that's fine. And then randomly one day you're like, why aren't you more careful?
Yeah.
And you scream at them. Now moving forward, your kid is like on eggshells because like, oh no, like, how are they going to react depending on what I do? Because it's not predictable.
And it's not dependable, and it's so much kinder to be dependable and be that person your dog can rely on, and they have a clear understanding than to be so wishy-washy because you want to be the nice guy and you want to be the nice owner. But then when things frustrate you, they really, really frustrate you.
Yeah.
And that's just not fair to the dog.
Well, and that's like something, even from my own personal life, that an exact scenario of this came up is like with my stepson and like his bedtime. When we set a bedtime, our intention as the parents was we expected him to like be ready to go to bed at this time, right? But that we never actually communicated the expectations of this is your bedtime, and we ran into multiple times where sometimes he was ready, but then sometimes he was getting ready at that time to then go to bed. And before I found myself getting frustrated with him, with being like, oh, well, you should be ready at this time, I realized I was like, I don't think we ever clearly designated what our expectations were and our criteria were for that. Had we gotten mad at him for not being ready, that's kind of unfair.
Yeah.
It was like he didn't know that at that time it meant you should have PJs on, you should brush your teeth, you should have gone to the bathroom, you should have done all these things. In his mind, it was like, oh, at this time, I start getting ready for bed, you know? So that was an exact example of that, where it's like, if you don't have your expectations clearly defined and you're consistent with them, you don't really have any place to get mad at your dog for them not listening or doing what you expected them to do in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, that can be complicated for people, like, because they want to get in the habit of, like, being understanding. And, of course, we want to be understanding and give the dogs the benefit of the doubt, but you have to realize that's not how dogs learn.
And I think it also gets even more complicated when you have partners. You know, we have two people that are taking care of the dog, because there's inevitably one person that is more soft and one person that's a little bit more firm.
Yeah.
And then you know, there's inconsistency even with that, you know, and so it's like, so that's one thing I always try to, you know, have good communication between like the owners on just like, have the expectations. Keep it simple. Doesn't need to be crazy. One person doesn't need to be doing 50 tricks and everything and all this, but like, keep it simple for you and for your dog so you guys can get this understanding, get it under wraps, find out where needs work, and then go from there.
You have to be on the same page, and if we're having this laundry list of, all right, we want them to sit at the door here, but not here, and then this and that. That's too complicated to run a household if multiple people are involved.
Yeah.
So you have to pick like a couple of things that really matter to you and communicate that with everybody in your household that will be handling the dog, aside from children, and say like, we're going to enforce these things. And that's going to be more healthy for your dog to have everybody holding them accountable and to be like, grandma or mom's not going to tell me to do that.
Yep.
And people view the dog like loving them or coming over to them as like, oh, they love me more than this person. And then the person that has to be getting on them, I think they end up respecting a lot more.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Because when you start getting to the point where you're overcomplicating everything, like you're just making more space for there just to be way more confusion for the dog.
Yep.
Yeah. And like, I'm training one of my best friend's dogs right now, and she doesn't need him to do a lot. She doesn't expect a lot out of him. She doesn't want, and he doesn't need to know all these commands. So in our sessions together, I realized she's giving him a lot of sit commands and bed commands, and she doesn't have the e-collar on, she doesn't have the prong on, so there's no way to enforce it. We just had the discussion, like, if you're not in a position to enforce these commands, try your best not to give them, because the habit of him realizing you're saying sit to me and you're not backing it up with anything is going to be so much stronger, that pattern, than if we give it to the sit command and we're ready to enforce it and we're able to follow through with it. His learning is going to be so much more exponential.
Yeah.
You know, people fall into a trap of like, oh, the e-collar wasn't on, oh, the prong wasn't on, and then they have no way of communicating to their
And
dogs.
you fall into that too with the, you know, one a little bit nicer, one a little bit more strict or whatever. That I'll do a follow up or something, and one person will say, you know, well, I feel like we were doing the same work, but they just seemed to listen to my husband and my wife more.
Yeah, you get that a lot.
And you know, the first question is, well, are you guys correcting, and are you correcting at the same level, right? And it's usually the person that they listen to more is more consistent with correcting, right?
Yeah.
Or they're correcting at more appropriate levels, where the other person is a little bit more lenient with, well, you know, I try to like give them one freebie at least with each session, or I try to, you know, I've been trying to work down on our levels since the last one, whatever, you know, and then we will go through it, and I'll have them kind of go back up to where the other person's at, and it always is better, you know.
Because the goal, this is kind of a rabbit trail, but you saying that made me think of it. The goal of corrections and e-collars is not to be able to correct at a low level. The goal is not to work your way down to where you're like, I only had to correct at 15, and then the goal is just not to do it at all.
Right.
Yeah, and the goal is to have something your dog's responsive to.
Yeah.
And we have to take out like, oh, 15 is way too high. Like, you have to see like, what is your dog responding to in the moment.
Yeah, the goal is not like, oh, will we eventually be able to go on lower levels when we're on walks. That's not even like a thought in my head. Like that's not like I don't know. The goal is that you don't have to correct them at all on the walk. That's the goal.
Yeah.
So I think that that's just a product of the modern e-collar training push, where we're trying to pander to like people who think e-collars are mean, and be like, oh, but we use it on really low levels to get the dog's attention.
Like Tom Davis.
Yes.
We only use the 6, and
we just use vibrate.
Yeah.
That's all we do.
And then people are like, oh my god, what a hero he is. And you're like, what the hell?
I know.
Wake up, America.
Yeah. I know. The goal of e-collars is to not have to use it.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
like,
the goal. When I go on a walk,
I
don't want to have this in my hand.
Yeah.
For the next
time.
like year and a half, I don't want to be like, fucking no! And then be like, where is it?
Run around the house trying to figure it out. Yeah.
Honestly though, it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
Because it's like I hate being put in a position where I feel like I'm being painted as the bad guy because I want to get you to the point where you don't have to use the e-collar to correct your dog, because you're being told by somebody who's like, hit the button every time you say a command, hit the button at this low level, so it's like a tap on the no, stop doing that.
Right.
Yeah, find something that's
Stop doing that.
meaningful, set up the good pattern.
Yeah.
And I'm like, now I can tell Sunday to sit, and she doesn't always have her e-collar on, and she does it. Like, not to be confused, like when your dog gets to a certain point, we shouldn't feel like we're constantly micromanaging them.
No.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
That's where we want.
I don't tell my dogs to do much.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously.
I really don't.
I use my come and my sit.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't tell them to do much. At this point, like, they just know how to function within my lifestyle. and do what I need them to do.
You're there to guide them.
And usually it's because I've corrected them to the point where they, in most contexts, they know what is off limits and they know therein what they can function within boundary wise. So like even getting here, so like when I get out of my car and I walk across the parking lot to go inside, I don't say anything to them.
Yeah.
They just know. I walk with mom as we go across the parking lot, and then we're at the doorway, and then we go in, because probably at some point they wandered too far away, and I said no, and I corrected them, and they came back, and they were like, "Oh, so this is what we do now."
No,
You know, I don't have to like micromanage them all the time for things, because it's obnoxious.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to do that.
Walk in the building with my little beagle pandering behind me happily. And she knows that she's not allowed to go near the street. She knows when we get in the door that she's not allowed to veer into the lobby because there's another dog. And because we've taken the time to set that up consistently and I've corrected her where I needed to, I don't find myself having to correct her daily or even weekly with some of this stuff.
Yeah.
She just knows. I'm there to give the correction if I need to set her back in straight, but I don't have to yell at her.
Which is so much simpler.
Yeah.
It's not that complicated.
No.
Yeah.
It's way more simple. Imagine like trying to take a dog that you were. I just can't even. If I couldn't correct my dogs for things, I don't think I'd even want to own dogs. That just sounds so exhausting and miserable to have to micromanage them forever.
Well, to have this like animal living in my house that I have no control over.
Yeah, that like
It's
this little like brat of a dog who's just like, when you bad. Like I honestly, I think of the dogs that I have right now, and I'm like, my life would be hell. If I wasn't able to have corrected them. You
literally wouldn't be able to have those 3 dogs.
No.
Like
no.
They would. It's dark. Like someone would have died.
Yeah.
You know, like
honestly, like Lumos for sure.
Yeah.
But like Cash, I mean, he was a jerk.
Yeah.
You know, like he was not an easy dog. Right. He was very, very assertive when he was young. Right. And like, and even for his own safety, I mean, he would eat anything.
Yeah.
You know, so like he probably would have died just from like a blockage or something at this point.
Yeah.
Snoop would be like a resource guarding maniac.
Yeah. But Snoop would also be a chew toy for Lumos.
Yeah, honestly, like it would just be utter, complete chaos. Yeah. I can't even imagine.
Without corrections, Nelson would be dead.
Yeah, honestly.
And I know people, like, there's this argument that, like, you can do everything positive and force-free only, and then they pander to, like, insinuating that because we use e-collars, we're not intelligent, or there's some
it's the lazy way of training.
Yeah, and then they'll pull up studies and be like, did you even read this study about separation anxiety by this peer-reviewed article? And it's like, one study.
Have you even trained a dog?
Yeah.
Honestly, show me the dogs you've trained.
And then you go on that person's page that's putting out this bullshit content, and they're like, you have to pay to get my information. Like, if you're not going to be even transparent enough to show me an idea of what you do, I know your time is valuable and your time should be respected, but if you're not showing any of that, why the hell would I pay you to tell you, you're going to tell me to give my dog treats?
Yeah.
And tell me to create my dog, manage my dog.
Well, and
micromanage.
When I had a lesson yesterday, which Paige actually filmed, but where we were talking about this a little bit, where the dog I was working with was just completely out of control. I mean, like attacking the family members, just super insecure, super reactive, just like completely unmanageable.
Yeah.
And they had gone through, what they say, like 2 or 3 click and treat type trainers prior to this and stuff and everything. And they were talking about how like the one trainer wouldn't even get within 2 feet of the dog, you know, like all of this stuff. And the adult, the man, he was like, you know, I think that some of those people, I think that, you know, they have good intentions. Like they think they're doing what's best and everything. And I said, and I was like, I don't disagree with you. I think that there are people that get into that type of dog training thinking they're doing the right thing and they're being the kindest they can to dogs. I said, but honestly, like, to me, that excuse and that, like, facade starts to wear thin if they've been doing it for any period of time, because you can't tell me that over I'd say longer than 6 months or a year of doing that type of training and seeing zero progress or the ability to help people that are having very real issues with their dogs, that
That's
you
true.
could sleep at night being like, give me more of your money.
Yeah.
For me to continue clicking and throwing treats
They're
to your
like,
dog
"Oh,
from across the room.
We need about 10 more sessions and this is what it's going to cost. And like,
Yeah.
I mean, I have a dog very similar that she went to behavioral clinic, the one in just around us. And they said for the first like year of her training, they were trying to desensitize her to dogs. And she'd go fucking ballistic if she saw a dog. And she had all of her basics down. She was very food motivated. She's like, she didn't give a shit about the treats when she was that close to dog. And I said, well, did they ever have her around dogs, like only on leash and really far away and behind gates? And
Put a muzzle on her and throw her in.
within
See what happens.
sessions, we're passing dogs. Like we're passing. Was it Ernie? We were passing
the big
Ernie,
guy.
And within like 2 corrections, that behavior stopped. And yes, we can be like, yeah, you're suppressing the dog's behavior.
That's the
yes,
point.
I am suppressing the dog's behavior
That is the point.
because we don't want to see that highly reactive that behavior because it's not enjoyable for the dog. And it's not fair to let the dog live in that mindset.
Right.
And it's not fair to the human to have to go out at midnight and walk the dog and do all these fancy things.
Yeah.
Because we feel a certain way about giving a correction.
And also, it's very convenient for people to hear us be like, yeah, we're suppressing behaviors, and we know that. We're doing it on purpose. But then to stop there, when it's like, that's not where we stop. I suppress a behavior, and then I change the reason the behavior was happening. But you can't change the reason a behavior is happening when they're too busy acting like a fucking maniac.
Well, and again, it
That
goes
just
back
doesn't
to
work.
if they don't know that it's a problem.
Yeah.
You know, if they've been allowed to act this way constantly their whole life,
Mm-hmm.
and then you are trying to teach them, oh no, do this, without actually suppressing that
Addressing
behavior, then
It's
why
always an
would they?
option.
Right.
That
right.
will always be an option.
Yes.
Even
not
if,
barking or not lunging. Yes, you're right. It's always an option.
yeah.
So make them choose that option instead of the habit that they've already kind of constructed for themselves. But be clear that there's
It's
a
off
reason
limits.
to stop that and start the new one.
Like,
right.
yes, you're terrified, so that's why you're reacting to that dog.
Yeah.
I get it. So, yes, I want to build your confidence, and I want you to know you don't have to be terrified, but you need to know that that coping mechanism is off the table.
Mm-hmm.
We're not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, so we don't just suppress. Like, we do counter conditioning. We change the emotion behind what's fueling those negative behaviors, but, like, we also need to correct those behaviors.
Right.
Like, if you've ever seen, like, humans are very different than dogs, but if you've ever seen, like, OCD interventions, like, or I struggle with OCD, and it's a lot of exposure, and you have to stop the person from completing these compulsions that they have in order for them to feel like, oh, I don't need to do those.
Yeah.
And then the anxiety reduces. But if you watch some of these OCD intervention shows, it's like very, very real to these people. And they're having these big panic attacks, and it's so irrational.
Yeah.
But by stopping the behavior, they're like starting to realize, like, oh, this isn't that bad.
Yeah, you realize that,
Yeah.
like, the compulsion you feel like you have to do isn't, if you don't do it, nothing bad is actually going to happen. But the only way you figure that out is by removing their option to do it in the first place.
And it's like the same thing with dogs. It's like they have these compulsions or these impulses to go ballistic, and then we add something that they care about and it's motivating for them to suppress that behavior, and then we can work going back on building confidence about being around other dogs and being like, this isn't scary, and I can actually play and open up and be a dog.
Yeah.
And then we don't have to live this miserable life indoors.
Being
and
stuck in their house for 6 years. And
Have you seen the recent drama, the dog trainer drama with American Standard K9 and like K9 Optima? But, and that whole circle thing that's happening over them basically saying that he was like beating a dog when he wasn't. Can you imagine, like, so what essentially had happened? Seamus, did you see or hear any of this? Do you know who American Standard Canine is?
Yeah.
He was on
Because
the
David had him on the podcast.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, to be fully transparent, like, some of what I see him do, American Standard Canine, I wouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't agree with everything he does. I do think sometimes he is a little bit, like, old school in how he handles dogs. I don't think he's abusive at any standard or any way at all. But he had a video that he put out literally like 2 years ago of a German Shepherd that was biting his own family, had gone through multiple trainers. This dog was like going to be put down if this wasn't like taken care of, essentially. These people drove like 5 hours to see him. I think his name is Garrett. I think so. They drove 5 hours to see Garrett, and he was like, when people drive 5 hours, it's kind of similar to when people travel that far to come here. Like, we're fixing it. Like, we're not taking forever and making these convoluted processes and, you know, oh, we need to do this step and this step and this step and this step. It's like, no, we're addressing the issue and we're going to fix it because that's why you came here, for us to help you. And so the dog had an aggressive episode and he popped him with the prong collar and gave him like a overcorrection, like 4 or 5 pops right after another. And after that, I mean, it's been 2 years. I mean, he even had the owner make a little video of like, the dog literally has not been aggressive ever since. Like, we fixed it. It's done. He knows that that's not happening anymore and we're good to go. And basically, when they originally posted the video, they blurred the part where he gave corrections because he was like, I was worried that YouTube was going to like take it down or like shadow ban it so nobody would actually get to see it, you know, whatever. And he's like, at this point, I realized that was a bad idea because it left room for people to like speculate on what I did. So he released the unedited version where when I watched it, I was like, that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, he literally popped the leash like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
And then, like, the dog didn't make great noises.
Right.
Yeah.
But also, the dog was trying to attack people.
You ever met a shepherd?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do
Literally.
you think that they make rational noises?
But all of that being said, what started all of this and why, like, I mean, his address has been doxxed. His family and wife are getting death threats. He's like all of this stuff because this other dude, Canine Optima, douchebag, he is all about pandering to, I don't use e-collars, I don't do all this, I don't do all of this. And he literally made a video saying, this man hit this dog. 100% certainty he hit this dog with zero proof about it. And it's just like, because, and if you watch any of his videos, everything is so overcomplicated. You know what I mean? And it's like, that dog needed to know that behavior is not okay. It is not okay.
Yeah.
And you're telling me that you could address an issue like that where a dog is dominant aggressive and will attack you just because you do something it doesn't like. You think you can fix that by never directly addressing the issue? By just avoiding it and going around the problem and never having to correct it? You can't.
Yeah.
You just
Something
can't.
was bound to happen.
Yeah,
Especially if there's kids in the house.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could pretend that going through this really overcomplicated path to somehow get there, but again, like we've talked about, if you never address it in their head, it is always an option. And you never know when they're going to choose that option because it's still open to them at that point.
And they realize like biting works and it gets them their way. And then dogs get euthanized because people refuse to work on it.
Save this dog's life is basically what I got out of that.
So the guy did what others trainers are scared of doing. Saved the dog's life, spared the family from further trauma, and the community, potentially, depending on how the dog would have behaved. And what does he get in return? Being slandered all over the internet and called a dog abuser with zero proof.
And it's so easy to take a little clip like that and be out of context, and then you see the voiceover is like, all right, guys, I'm going to break down the body language. Ears up, whale eye, 45 degrees in its tail. And then they really sound like they know what they're talking about. And people are like, this is just incredible. You know how to read dogs' body language. Like, body language experts online, like, don't listen to
It's so subjective.
Yeah.
Right.
And people will, like send videos of them, like, kissing their dogs. Of, like, your dog doesn't like that because I can tell. Look at his eyes. Like, my dog's response to being pet is to growl and make noises, and he loves being pet.
Yeah.
He's just a vocal dog.
Yeah. Have you met Watson?
Where it's like purring.
I will literally, we need to film it at some point, Paige.
Yeah.
Me and Watson's favorite game that we like to play, it's this corgi that's owned by our facility manager. I literally will grab him and like bear hug him and shake him, and he like growls the whole time. And then when I let him go, he goes, and he runs back up to do it again. You know what I mean? And it's like, I've always found it so funny that if you just cut and clipped me doing that and his response to it, I mean, people would go absolutely insane on the internet. They'd be like, oh, she's gonna get bit at some point and she's ignoring his cues. And it's like, no, you can't apply these like overgeneralized things to every single dog. Yeah. It's so different.
Yeah, and every dog like has different parameters for like what they like and don't like and how they express themselves. And some dogs look like people always confuse calm as sad. So like they're not bouncing off the walls anymore. They're not trying to tackle me.
Scratching about crawling up me,
Yes.
How's that enjoyable for anybody when your dog acts like that?
It's not. It's not.
It's overwhelming.
It is overwhelming. Imagine coming home from like a day at work and your dog doing that. That would be my last straw. Yeah. My last straw. Couldn't do it.
I think it's like going back to the internet thing. I think it's really easy, and I think that that's bullying on the internet. To like pick apart somebody.
Oh, for sure.
And have all this hate toward them, and you're spreading hate into the world because you're the perceived hero for exposing them and all of their methods. And it's like, these are the methods that are saving dogs.
Yeah. So like, what's the point? What do you think that's gonna do for you? Yeah. I don't know. When I see people on the internet being like super, super critical and stuff like that of other people, especially when they don't know them, they don't know anything about them, I'm like, what an overinflated sense of ego that you think I care.
It's more about
what you have to say about this
and your presence and your ego on social media than it is about who you are and your core values as a human being. Yeah. It's like, I love the glory of social media. I love all the comments like coming to my defense and supporting me, and it's so much more about that. If we didn't have social media, think of the world of dog training. What would that be like? Yeah. There'd be a lot less dog trainers. Yeah. Because a lot of this is just for show and just to be an influencer. So what would dog training look like without social media?
Yeah. Be a lot different.
What?
It'd be a lot less confusing.
Might be a good topic sometime to,
That would be interesting to like think about.
If Instagram, Facebook, and things didn't exist like they didn't 20 years ago, what did the dog training world look like then? If you can't post about it, go to the library to read information about dog training.
Honestly.
See those peer-reviewed studies,
Yeah. No, that's actually a really interesting thing to think about. I feel like, I don't want to say that it's only had a negative impact on it, because I think there are some positives for sure. Because, I mean, you think about the amount of people that have found good dog training through the internet.
Well, and kind of what you're saying, going across state lines and stuff, like, no one would,
you wouldn't know that stuff existed otherwise. So
those
I think
options are out there.
I think that unfortunately you just have to take the good with the bad then at that point. Because, there's definite benefits to it. You just have to be able to, like, use some, what's the word that I'm looking for? Deductive reasoning to, like, weed out all the
Social media can
the
be
nonsense.
an absolute terrible thing, but it can be a very, very productive, beautiful thing too.
Yeah.
And people are just unhinged with being able to be anonymous. And
Well, and they like get this weird enjoyment out of this like pack mob mentality where
I'm in
like
a group that agrees with this.
yeah, well, and it's like the people that have huge followings that like make a video painting somebody in a bad light, especially when you don't have any proof of it. You can't have, and like obviously your goal with that is so that people feed your ego of like, oh, I'm so glad you're speaking on this. I knew you'd know what to say.
Right, activist.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's like
you're the voice of reason for the dog.
Yeah, it's just weird. It's weird. I think that's always, I don't know. It's an odd dynamic, for sure.
Looking for like transparency. Like if I'm going on somebody's page to find out more about how they train, I want to see how they train. I don't want to hear you talk about how you train.
Yes.
I want to see how you train.
Because I get the irony of me shitting on people on social media and like, oh, why do you think I care what you have to say as I'm sitting on a podcast on social media? Like, it's not lost on me. I see it. But I would like to think that the majority of what we talk about is like our practical experience with things.
Yeah.
You know, and for the most part, we're not like, today we're going to talk about this trainer and why they suck. Like, that's just a little bit different.
Yeah.
Yes.
We all have trainers that we don't agree with, but I'm not going to waste my time picking their training apart.
No.
It doesn't benefit.
It doesn't benefit me.
What does that do for me?
And I'm sure there's probably people out there that they've helped.
Yeah.
Good for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for them. If it works for you, it works for you. That's fine.
We just try to keep it simple.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Coming back to the whole
thing. Simplifying.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be complicated.
Yes.
Like going back to the lesson that Paige filmed for us yesterday, which will be in the vlog, which I think was cool to hear, was like the whole theme I felt like was them being like, it was just a simple process. You know what I mean? Like they felt like they were having to follow all these weird rules and guidelines and like, oh, when the dog does this, you need to click and treat that, and then you need to, don't allow her to do that. Like it's just, there was just too much. And that's not feasible for an average person just trying to like live a life with a dog.
And it's like your main focus, unfortunately, is not your dog all the time.
Yeah.
So you need to find really practical things that are going to be simple and humane to train your dog.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if you feel like you're overwhelmed and things are just very complicated and you're just like, what am I even supposed to do at this point? Take a few steps back and think about like, what am I actually trying to get from my dog right now? Do I need them? What do I actually want? Do I need them to do something or do I need them to stop doing something? That will tell you whether you need a command or whether you need a correction. And then if you need a command, okay, what command do they potentially already know that would help me accomplish what I'm trying to do? I don't need to get fancy. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel, So that's why, we teach here, come, a sit or a down, depending on what you would prefer as the owner. And then bed. And that's it.
And through those 3 commands, you can make so much happen.
Yeah, you can do so many things. You don't need anything else.
You can also work on making things not happen through correction, but we don't use our obedience to make things not happen.
Yeah. So, it doesn't need to be complicated.
Yeah. And if you have any questions, just reach out.
It's true. It's true. Thanks for joining us today, guys.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining the Spicy Dog Podcast.
The Spicy Dog Podcast, where you get all your Spicy Dog information. You can find us on the Spicy Dog Podcast. It's also called the Miracle Canine Show.
But if you want some extra spice, Spicy Dog Podcast.
Spicy.